Good morning. Welcome to Gray Roots. I'm Laura and I'm the programs coordinator here. And I'm so excited you could join us today to do our Made by Me kit. And today is all about tie-dye. Before we get started, we're just going to do a few housekeeping items. So first of all, if you're watching live, we're going to keep our webcams off and our microphones off as well. But if you have any questions or want to say anything, the chat box is on and available, and you can just type in and we are monitoring it as we go today. So thank you again for joining us. And before we jump in, we're going to do some talking about natural dyes. So obviously the tie-dye kit that you have at home or will be picking up is not a natural dye. It is a commercially produced dye. But luckily, all around us, there's actual things that we can dye or stain materials with. So one of the things early on in the spring, I had some trouble finding the normal egg dye around Easter. So I thought I would investigate some different ways I could dye with things I had around my house. So I was able to do, and these are from Easter, but I blew them out, so they're not like rotten eggs. So this is an egg dyed with blueberries, turmeric powder, and then also onion skins. So one of the things that the only downside to the natural dyes with this, for sure, especially with the onion skins, is that when you're boiling down the items in water to make your dye bath, it's kind of fragrant. Like there's a smell for sure. So nowadays it's a great time to be able to take these things outside. And actually all of these different items, these different yarns you can see here, were actually dyed, and the way they are dyed, it has to be done outside for safety. Because as a video that I will talk about later discusses, too much of a good thing, even a natural item, can be bad for you. So these two pieces, they were actually dyed with goldenrod, that weed you find all around. So it can get harvested and then you can use it to create a dye bath. And then that's just kind of like a nice kind of taupe. It started white, I should also say, and it started with fibers like this. So this is wool that has been cut and it just needs to be carded because it's still a little rough, and then it can be spun to make the yarn. Now this yarn was actually dyed with a combination of black walnut and butternut. So if you have nut allergies, not a good choice. But walnuts are plentiful around here, and there are still butternut trees. I grew up actually with a walnut tree on our family farm, and the only thing I knew it was good for was just making funny sounds when I rode over the walnuts with my bike. But now that I work here at Gray Roots, I'm actually able to learn the different things. And we actually have a walnut tree on site at Gray Roots that we're able to harvest when the walnuts fall off the tree. We harvest them, we take the green part off of the walnut, and it's actually the green part that has all of the wonderful dye in it. If you see my basket here, the darker reed was actually dyed with walnut, and then the lighter reed is what it looks like not dyed. So that was a really fun experiment for me, but it's also something that's an ongoing learning process because there's so much information online that if you are interested about trying any of these natural dyes, definitely look it up and find out more. Locally, we also have a few spinning and weavers, and we also have a special guild. Some of you might recognize they also do sales at the library typically, and so there are people even locally that you could connect with if you have questions or want to learn more. And this yarn was dyed with sumac. So all these different things, and there are so many more things that are outside our villages right there. So I always point to it. But there's so many things around us that can give us different colors. Greens are a really good natural dye, but there's also a few colors that aren't typically found in nature, at least here. So if you're ever seeing something that's like blue or red, chances are it's a commercial dye, it was imported, so it's not something that we can find just growing anywhere. And sometimes, if you like gardening, you might have, or just enjoy eating them. Beets seem to stain, but they are just a stain. They're not really a dye. Because on all of these different dyeing processes to get these, there's other steps too. It's not just sticking in the dye and you're done. There's something called a mordant, and you can even stick things into different types of pots. So for example, this one is labeled as brass. So this yarn, after it was in its dye bath, it rested in a brass pot. So that then changed and reacted to the dye to change the color a bit. Because you can see that, because even a copper pot will do a different color. So there's so many different layers and so much you could do. So if it's something that's of interest to you, on our Facebook today, and I'll share the link when I send out the post after we're done with the recording, that Harriet Boone, one of the local spinners, weavers, and dyers, she actually does a in costume talking about dyeing using walnuts. And then she talks about the different steps and just some of the things to be careful about. So that's something that it was definitely of interest to me, and so I hope it's of interest to you, because if you're here, you are interested in dyeing. And so I think we are going to get started now with our tie-dyeing. So I hope you all have your supplies just to have on hand to understand what I'm talking about. And if you have any questions as we're going through this, don't forget, just throw them in the chat box and then I'm happy to answer them. But we're going to go over a few different steps and look at some different supplies, because the shirt I'm wearing, it's one of my tie-dyes, and it's honestly one of the most fun things you can do. It's a summer tradition for me and my family, and so I hope you have fun with doing it this year. Okay, so the very first technique that we're going to talk about is called Shibori. So, and I wanted to talk about it first because in doing my research and everything, I found out that while the instructions in the tie-dye kit, they talk about it as like, oh, this is something you can do, it's actually one of the historic, traditional, like potential precursors or the origin story of tie-dye. So Shibori is very interesting because it uses usually indigo. So this is an example of one that I did a couple weeks ago. And my shirt material, it was a little too soft. So whatever you use, it probably will work out a little better than this one did. But the process was it was interesting. I know my kids really liked playing with the tube. So for this one, you'll need a bit of a tube or a dowel. You could even use like a limb from a tree if you need to. And I just covered mine with plastic. It's just an old nailing tube. And you're going to just wrap it around. This is with the tote bag, but you can do it with a t-shirt. You just wrap it around. So it's just completely wrapped up. And then I put an elastic just in the middle, just to keep things a little secure. You might need some stretch, but you could also use cotton string or anything like that just to help secure it. And then the next step is fairly easy. You're just going to smush it. You're going to smush it into the middle. And once you kind of get it a good amount, on one end, you can just put another elastic band, because you're going to try to just use it to secure it so it doesn't move when you keep smushing, because you're going to smush the other end and get it as tight as possible. And you want it to get all those little grooves, because all those little grooves are going to create resists where the dye will not go and it will remain white. So I'll just secure that. And then I could be good to go to dye. So I could just put the dye on. You could dunk the whole thing in a dye bath if it's really nice and tight. You could do more elastic bands all the way down. It is completely up to you, because each of these things, and like that's one of the greatest things about tie-dye, is every time you dye, it's going to be unique. So if I was ready, I could also make it get wet before I added the dye. I could get it wet, and as you know, you have the little bottles. You are supposed to fill them carefully, perhaps with adult assistance, all the way to the top line. And then making sure you put your finger over top, you shake it up and make sure it's all the powder's dissolved. But if you want, you can just wet this and then shake the powder out. You have to be extra careful though, because when powder is going around, especially powder with dye, you don't want to breathe that in. So an adult might be a good assistant for that. And you can see what happens. Now the hardest part about tie-dye, and I'm 100% serious, this is the hardest part, you have to wait. You can't look at your beautiful future tie-dye for hours. And actually, the longer you leave it, the better. I usually, after me and my family do it, usually I hide them so no one can look at them, at least for a day. And then the next morning, I will get them out and then I will start rinsing them. And then do the whole process, just so the longer the dye sits before you rinse it off, the brighter and longer the color is going to last. Okay, so that was Shibori. And you can look online, because there was so much information about Shibori, like the more traditional way to do it, more folding techniques, anything like that. Because that's the thing, like we just want to start giving you ideas about how to create something, but you get to decide what you end up with. Okay, and well, even when I released that, you can see how tight that was and the type of pattern that it could have created when I dyed that. So the next one I'm going to look at, I have so many shirts over here. This one is the Bullseye. So for this one, it's fairly easy. This one you do, well, actually with all of them, the color wheel is very important. I pretty much say that in every single one of these made by me, but because colors are close together, they can mix. So if you aren't too sure about what colors are going to mix to make what, you should definitely look at your color wheel, or you can look online. But certain colors make other colors. So with blue and pink that I had, it made a bit of purple. And then I also had the black, so it made a little bit of a different color. But for the Bullseye, all I do, start again, is I pick where I want the center of the bullseye to be. So for in my case, it was right here. So all I did was pick it up, and then I shake, or it stays up on its own. It's very handy. And then you just start adding elastic bands. Now the hardest or the tightest you can get, the better, because then that's going to create those really clear divisions between the different colors. And then that is it. You can do as many or as little as you want. You can do more than one center of a bullseye, totally up to you. And then for this one, I did make sure that the t-shirt was wet before I added the color. And then that's why I did get some of those bleed lines, because that was what I wanted for this look. But so for this one, it's just as simple as that. And you can do as much dye at the bottom as you want. I think, because normally I work in a tote or tub, I added the colors. So there was like black and blue, blue, the pink and the blue, and then just solid pink. And then because there was some extra dye in the bottom of the tub, I just kind of sopped it up at the end. And that's what you can do, or you can just completely keep it white. It is totally up to you. Now, perhaps my favorite, because I am wearing it, is the spiral. So this one, while it seems like it's really easy, I get mixed results. So the shirt that I'm wearing is my favorite one that I've done. This one that I did a couple weeks ago, it wasn't my favorite. So when I get ready, all you do is, again, pick out where your center is going to be. And then you can use, I've seen forks, I use pliers with this one, but you just pinch where you want your center to be, and then you just start turning. And I don't know if this will, so if you see that, we just keep turning and turning. And that's why it's nice if you have a device like a fork or pliers to help you. Just make sure you don't pierce the shirt or your tote bag or whatever you're dyeing. And then you just keep going. And then when I get closer to the end, then I start tucking in everybody else. And then I keep going and I keep going. And this is sometimes when it's good to just practice and practice, because from here, you're going to wrap with elastics. And I definitely would not dye this one because I'm already not happy with how my swirl has worked out. But the more you do it, and like, honestly, normally I prep all of my shirts before I even activate the dye, because I want to make sure that I'm happy with it, because sometimes I do get frustrated with them when they're not twisting or staying like I want them or hope they would. So all I do is take breaks. Normally I aim for like a t-shirt a day. Because the other thing is too, you need to make sure that your shirts are clean. They are not pre-washed, or the tote bags. And you just need to wash them without any softener or any additives, just your regular fabric wash. And then they'll be ready to go. But you just want to make sure everything is nice and neat. If it's too wrinkled, you might want to do a quick iron. I'm just trying to, and just take your time. Earlier, there was a big sheet on the presentation stand with the yarns and everything like that. And that was a king size sheet. So I had to like clear out the floor in our kitchen. And then I just sat there and worked on it. And I definitely used pliers for those swirls there, just because I wanted to make sure they were tight and I was doing multiple pieces. So any of these techniques you can do multiple ways and multiple times. It doesn't really matter. I just want you to be happy with it. And with your 4 bottles of dye, that does quite a few projects. So when I did this testing run, I still have like 3 more shirts that I did, and I still have over a full bottle of dye left. So your 4 bottles are going to do quite a bit. You could choose to do just one color for now, or do all of them, and you can do more than do more than your t-shirt for sure, or your tote bag, just whatever you have lying around. So with that shirt, the original Shibori that I showed you, with the shirt, I actually cut it apart to make some t-shirt yarn. And I'll include a link for that in the email when I send out the recording notice. And so I'm going to be able to, I can make this into a bracelet, I can make my braid into a headband, whatever I want. It's just the shirt definitely was not wearable anymore, regardless, but I'm still able to repurpose it and do something really fun with it. I could even add that to the tote bag handle. Could even add that as another handle. So you can do whatever it is you like to do with permission, of course, from your family, but this is just a starting point for what you can do. There are so many different techniques out there for tie-dye. So the next thing I'm actually going to try is I've ordered some more dye. I just need to get some shirts, but you can tie-dye with ice cubes. So you get your piece, and they suggest making a little bit of a frame to concentrate the ice cubes, but then you put ice cubes on top and sprinkle just the dry powder on it. So then as the ice cubes melt, it will dye your material. So a staff person here had mentioned that. I was like, yes, I want to try that. And then something else new that I tried was doing the reverse tie-dye. So taking a black t-shirt and then adding bleach. So this is definitely with adult help. It took me a couple of goes with the bleach. Maybe I don't have strong bleach, I don't know. I don't normally bleach clothes. So this one was a swirl. I twisted it all up, and then I added bleach outside with gloves and everything. And I let it sit for hours to try and get it to bleach. And then you can even, once you're done, add color back, and you could just take your dye when it's wet and just add it in specific areas. Totally up to you. I'm thinking I might leave this one, but it might be I'm looking at clouds in the sky, but I kind of feel like this looks like a dragonfly, so I want to leave it just because I do like how it turned out. And then the different layers from the two different tries with the bleach actually add a bit of different colors. And I will give information to that effect about the bleach in the reverse tie-dye in the email as well. And I don't know. Oh, so we protect our workspaces. Again, I have the plastic down. Or like I said, you can just work in a tub. Because these things dye, wear gloves. That's very, very, very important. And then just keep your workspace clean, but also consider what you're wearing. So when I was doing this, especially with the bleach, but with any of the colors, I always make sure I'm wearing something that I don't mind if it gets miscolored. Because again, you're dyeing clothing specifically. You want to be careful and not wreck something that you actually do like. And then I will quickly show this one for color mixing. So I didn't have any green, and when I did the practice, I only had blue and yellow, and then the pink and the black. So for this one, it actually says something about keeping green, and I did a kind of like an accordion fold, and then I did elastic bands in where those colors were. So then I was able to mix the colors, but then you can actually still see the original primary color. So again, there are so many different ways to do it. There's a lot of t-shirts that have graphics. You can still tie-dye those t-shirts. And usually those are a lot of fun. to do because you can work it into the design and make it look like it's on purpose. And do we have any questions? I don't have. No question. Okay, so we are done, I do believe. If you have any questions though, please let me know. Read your instructions. The instructions are always very, very, very important. But you can dye so many different things as long as it's a natural fiber, cotton, silk, rayon. They are the best. There are some shirts that like to sneak in some polyester, so they may not work so well. And yeah, so if you have any questions though, just send me an email. When this recording is available online, we will send another email and get it posted as soon as possible. And we really hope that you have a great tie-dye experience. And thank you for joining us on Made by Me.